The Honourable Michael Mischin. And I would remind members that this is also the member's inaugural speech, and I would ask you to extend the usual courtesies. The Honourable Michael Mischin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise in this place today as a humble, grateful and proud Australian. Humble because in electing me, I know that the people of the North Metropolitan region have put their faith in me, and I am well aware of their expectations. Grateful to everyone who has helped me to get here, to the Liberal Party, to my family and to my supporters, and a proud Australian because I recognise and I am reminded daily that I owe this country everything that I have and everything that I am. Despite popular cynicism, I still believe that to serve the community in the parliament of a robust democracy such as ours is an honour. It's also a challenge, now perhaps more than ever. But there are some values and some institutions that must endure and that are worth preserving. I propose briefly to reflect on what I believe to be important about being part of this institution and why it should never be taken for granted. We, the newly elected members of this place, take our seats in this place in global circumstances the like of which have not been seen for nearly 80 years. The world is changing rapidly in many ways, and we owe it to the people who have placed their trust in us to adapt, to persevere, and to overcome the challenges those changes present. More than that, we owe them our commitment to ensure proper regard for and protection of their fundamental rights and liberties. We owe it to them to maintain a balance between the powers of this Parliament and those of the executive and of the judiciary. And we also owe it to them to rebuild respect for the institution of Parliament. Mr. President, I am an ordinary middle-aged Australian. I make no claim to any political ancestry or indeed to any lifelong ambition for a political career. My interest in parliamentary service came rather late in life, and I have been fortunate to have been allowed the opportunity to realise that interest. I merely hope that when I leave this place, people will say of me, he served the state well. That is something that can truly be said of my two North Metropolitan region predecessors, the Honourable George Cash and the Honourable Ray Halligan, men who, despite their differences that they may have had with political opponents over the years, were nevertheless respected for their service to Parliament and to the community, and I acknowledge them in more detail in due course. If I can bring to this Parliament just some of the values that I've tried to live by in my private and professional life, I will consider my time here a success. Those values are loyalty, integrity, respect for others, and a commitment to do what is right. These are the touchstones that, with the forbearance of members, will guide me during my parliamentary journey. Like so many Australians, I count the experiences of my immigrant forebears, reinforced by what I have learned through my study of history, among the most important building blocks in my life. Mischin is obviously not an Anglo-Saxon name. My parents came to Australia as displaced persons following the Second World War. They came here as children with what was left of their families and with only what possessions they could carry in suitcases. They came here in the aftermath of a war that, in the 12 months leading to its end, was killing 1 million people a month. It was a war that ravaged Europe and had threatened to destroy civilised society and replace it with a refined barbarism masquerading as law and order. It was not their first dislocation. My paternal grandparents were Russians who had fled a murderous revolution and eventually settled in Yugoslavia. My paternal grandfather was killed in a bombing raid on Belgrade during the Second World War. My father was only about 10 years old at the time. His brother was an officer cadet in the Yugoslav army when the Germans invaded, and he was taken a prisoner of war. However, my father and my grandfather managed to escape Yugoslavia and reunited with my uncle. They ended up in Germany as displaced persons. My mother's family also hailed from Eastern Europe. Her family, from a small village on the Polish-Belarusian border, suffered loss and dislocation during the war, and by its end, most of what have remained of her family were working on farms in Germany. It was from there that they, like so many others, came to Australia. Mum and Dad met and grew up at the Holden camp in Northam. They married in that town and moved to Perth. They struggled to find a place in a country that offered peace and prosperity, but was nowhere near as cosmopolitan as it is today, and where sometimes immigrants found it difficult to gain acceptance. You may understand then, Mr. President, why the Honourable Helen Bullock's account of her own coming to Australia and her experience of being a stranger in a strange land struck a sympathetic chord with me. My parents worked hard, they lived frugally, and they provided all that they could by way of comfort, educational opportunities and familial support to me and to my three sisters. I was educated in state schools, those in Karrinyup at my primary level and Scarborough Senior High School at my high school level, after which I went to the University of Western Australia, and there, after a shaky start, I graduated in law with honours. I did my articles in a private law firm, and for a couple of years worked for a one-man practice, that of one Athol C. Gibson, a man of generosity and of whom I have fond memories. In 1985, I commenced work at the Crown Law Department as a research officer for Ron Davies QC, the then State Crown Prosecutor. Ron was, and still is, something of a legend in the legal profession, and as a man who I still regard as a consummate prosecutor and a fearless advocate. Anyway, that was the start of a career in the criminal law that has spanned almost 24 years, almost exclusively as a prosecutor for the state. I've presented cases in courts across Western Australia, and in doing so I've met all manner of people, young and old, good and bad, and from all backgrounds. To do my job, I've had to be able to understand what makes people tick. And in the process, I've learned to appreciate, if not necessarily agree with, other people's points of view. Of course, in the course of my career, I have seen incompetence, I've seen corruption, and I've seen base behaviour. But I've also had my faith in human nature strengthened by finding resilience, honesty, community spirit and generosity where I least expected it. I've travelled widely across the state, and I've seen the circumstances in which others live, city and country, and I believe that I've acquired an appreciation of their problems. There is nothing so destructive, in my view, to a community, even to a state as great as Western Australia, as the feeling that others don't understand or care about your particular problems. I've learned the importance of listening to others and the importance to them that they have been heard. For example, I have stayed in distant regional centres when out on circuit. While that, of course, is not the same as living there full time, it does give one an inkling of the sorts of problems that people face in those centres. The frustration of poor telephone connections, of unreliable electricity, of prohibitively expensive airfares, of lack of accommodation in growing centres, of reduced access to medical facilities, even of getting the morning paper a day later than everyone else in the state. All in all, it's the feeling that because you are in a rural centre, you may as well be in another country altogether. I've also found that even differences between some parts of this city can be as profound as those between Perth and the remotest parts of the state. It's an appreciation of this unique diversity of ours that has reinforced my commitment to preserve our state's autonomy. We are, I believe, best served by a genuine cooperative federal system of government. Mr. President, I've alluded to one of the things the wartime experiences of my parents and grandparents hammered into me. What happened in Europe in the lead up to the Second World War indelibly impressed upon me the dangers of concentrating too much power in the one set of hands and how badly power can be abused. Although of Eastern European heritage, I was born and raised an Australian. My career as a legal practitioner has made me an even greater admirer of the institutions that we have inherited from Britain. Ideals such as an independent judiciary, an independent civil service, and the concept of a bicameral legislature. I accept that, as a general principle, the government of the day should not be obstructed in its legislative program. But that does not mean that the manner in which it implements its program should not be critically examined with the utmost probity and, where necessary, opposed. For example, in some cases where public passions over an issue are inflamed, a hasty legislative response may result in laws that are badly drafted or of unforeseen or undesirable consequences. We can't afford the luxury of allowing expediency to triumph over principle. Our system provides us with a cooling off period and an opportunity for further examination and consideration. No publisher, for example, would consider sending something to print without it being reviewed by a proofreader. And yet, the way we're going, I genuinely feel that the erosion of our rights and freedoms may occur by stealth. I acknowledge that the community's desire for security, whether it is from terrorists or thugs in pubs, creates a seemingly increasing demand for regulation. There's an assumption, probably with its genesis in the concept of the welfare state, that governments can cure every ill. But laws alone cannot eliminate every risk a citizen faces, and no human institution has ever functioned with machine-like precision, let alone satisfied everyone's expectations of it. Laws can only provide a measure of our rights and obligations. They guarantee nothing. History has shown us that such a chaotic search for state-guaranteed safety can only result in the creation of a police state. We must be wary that, in our search for security and to perfect our institutions, we do not lose the flexibility that allows them to adapt and to evolve. This, after all, has been the source of their resilience over the centuries and their value up till now. Now, let me say that I believe the greatest defence against that is not a Bill of Rights. We will not protect the people by abrogating responsibility to unelected judges or to broad and bold statements of principle that do not allow for subtlety and necessary exception. People can, however, protect themselves by better understanding the basics of our system of government and the institutions upon which our society is founded. And we, as legislators, can protect the people by exercising our power in the most principled way. The latter is why the Legislative Council continues to have a vitally important role in our system of government and why I am particularly grateful to be able to serve in this place. But, as every comic or movie superhero knows, power carries with it responsibility. I believe our responsibility is to deal with the business before the House diligently and expeditiously, and not to willfully obstruct the progress of matters before it by insubstantial attempts at point scoring. And I believe that obstruction and disruption are an insult to the dignity of this House and are a betrayal of the responsibilities we bear towards our constituents. Mr. President, it's customary on this occasion to acknowledge those who have contributed to my being here, and I'm honoured to do so now. There's a risk in this, of course. Firstly, there are so many to whom I owe so many things that to mention them all might not only take up the rest of tonight, but part of tomorrow as well. But it will also inevitably mean that I will miss someone out or not do someone justice. So I'll specifically thank just a few people in the knowledge that those who I do not mention by name will know that their contributions are close to my heart and I shall not forget them. I've already thanked my constituents. The reality is that people who vote for candidates in this chamber are primarily voting for a party. I recognise that I'm here as a representative of the Liberal Party, of which I've been a proud member for some 17 years. Nevertheless, I would especially thank, or like to especially thank, the 161 North Metropolitan Region voters out of the 280,235 who eschewed the party ticket and gave me their first preference. I had no idea I was that popular. And I can assure you, Mr. President, that even my extended family is nowhere near that large. I now turn to those who are direct influence in my being elected. Firstly, I thank my wife, Robin. Her love and friendship has sustained me in the hard times, and despite her serious misgivings about the impact my change of career is going to have on her quality of life, she nevertheless continues to support me. Thank you to my family, to my parents, George and Maria, for their love and nurture, for doing the best they could for me, and for providing me with what they were able. To my parents-in-law, John and Nolene, who have supported and encouraged me, and as an additional bonus, are great friends. To my sisters, Lana, Tanya and Nadia, I thank them for putting up with me all these years. To the Honourable Peter Collier, I also say a heartfelt thank you for his inspiration, his counsel and support. I marvel, and no pun intended, at his energy and the commitment that he brings to the job, and I look forward to adding a long and fruitful working relationship to our enduring friendship. To the Liberal Party, I thank it for its support. To my branch, Dalkeith, they are a wonderful bunch of people like President Anne Patrick and Vice President Ian Warner. Our branch activities have not only been dedicated to the advancement of the Liberal cause, but also to the principle that we should have fun while doing it, and I think we've tended to succeed in both. To the other members of my division and the neighbouring divisions in my region, I say thank you too for your support and your confidence in me. At this point, I'd like to further acknowledge the contribution of the Honourable Ray Halligan. As the Leader of the House said on the occasion of Ray's retirement, Ray has been a tireless worker for our parliamentary party. He has had a long and genuine interest in the ethnic communities in the North Metropolitan Region and indeed across the state. And he's contributed significantly to this House and to its committee system. I also acknowledge and thank him for his personal support and his encouragement and his advice since my election. One of my objectives will be to maintain the standards that he has set. I also wish to pay tribute to the Honourable George Cash. I need not recap his long and distinguished career in politics, in our party and in this Parliament. His achievements speak for themselves. For me personally, however, George has been someone who has also generously volunteered his time, his counsel and his wisdom over the months since my election, my period in limbo as it were. I shall certainly value his advice in the future. I wish to acknowledge the assistance of the parliamentary staff who have, and the help that they have given me over the past several weeks, and the level of professionalism that they bring to their duties. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge the support of my electorate officer, Cheryl Paternoster, and my research officer, Peter Ramshaw, and to thank them for their enthusiasm to join me in what promises to be an exciting and rewarding adventure. Like most newly elected members, I arrive here as a relative neophyte. My experience in the law for some 24 years will no doubt help me, but I'm nevertheless conscious that I'm starting at the bottom of an evolutionary ladder. I know full well that I have very much to learn. At the same time, I do believe that I have something that I can contribute. I look forward to working with my parliamentary colleagues, who I thank for the warmth of their welcome since my arrival here. I also look forward to working with, and as necessary, opposing the members on the other side of this chamber. And I look forward to doing that with the conviction that whether we work in concert or in conflict, we are doing so for the betterment of this institution and striving for the benefit of the people of Western Australia. I look forward to serving my electorate and to the people of this state as best I can. I look forward to honouring this Parliament and this chamber and I look forward to honouring the Liberal Party. On a parting note, I'd like to say that my experience in nominating for, being selected for, and winning a seat in this House has been a journey that I will never forget. As West Australians, we should never forget what a privilege it is to be able to be involved in politics in our uniquely Australian way. We must never forget the unique freedoms that we have and must cherish these above all else. One of the most satisfying things I have found about polling day, apart from winning of course, is the fact that no matter what passions may be aroused by the issues and the circumstances on the day, or in the weeks leading up to it, voters can cast their vote with the confidence of knowing that they can then go home safe and sound. And that is a lot more that can be said of so many other places in the world. And I'd like to be able to do my bit to keep Australia that way. I thank you, Mr. President and members, for your patience and your indulgence.